Hey guys, tonight we begin with something that'll make you appreciate central heating, modern plumbing, and the fact that your biggest daily worry isn't whether you'll die gloriously in battle or shamefully from dysentery. We're talking about waking up as a Viking in 79 to the 3 AD, the year when Norse raiders first terrorized European coastlines and made going Viking the medieval equivalent of extreme sports, except the losers actually died. So before you get comfortable in your climate-controlled room, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. A world where you can communicate instantly without having to sail across freezing oceans in wooden death traps. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture this: you close your eyes tonight in your warm bed, probably complaining about your Wi-Fi speed, or the fact that your coffee maker takes 30 seconds to brew your morning fuel. But when you open them again, you're not just in a different place, you're in a completely different person. A massive, bearded, axe-wielding Norse warrior, whose idea of a good time involves crossing icy seas to terrorize monks, and whose retirement plan consists of dying spectacularly enough to get invited to Valhalla. But here's where things get really terrifying. You're not just visiting the Viking Age, you are a Viking. Your body is now a muscle-bound killing machine that smells like fish, leather and questionable personal hygiene decisions. Your brain is still modern, but your hands know how to swing a battle axe. Your stomach can digest raw fish without complaint, and your pain tolerance has apparently been upgraded to probably superhuman. Welcome to where your morning routine includes checking if your weapons are sharp enough to split skulls, where your career prospects involve either successful raiding or glorious death, and where the only social media is carved runes on stone monuments commemorating how epically someone died in battle. And trust me, death is about to become a very real and immediate concern, because you're about to discover that being a Viking isn't just a lifestyle choice. It's a constant negotiation with mortality that makes extreme sports look like knitting circles. The first thing you notice isn't the cold, though there's plenty of that. It's not the smell though. That's impressively terrible. It's the fact that you're lying on what feels like an entire zoo's worth of animal pelts. And judging by the texture against your skin, these animals died recently, and weren't particularly concerned with personal hygiene during their final days. Your bed, and we're using that term very loosely, consists of bear furs, wolf pelts, and what might be seal skin, all layered together in a configuration that's simultaneously the softest and most uncomfortable sleeping arrangement you've ever experienced. It's like sleeping on a pile of expensive rugs that happen to smell like a wet dog convention. But here's the really disturbing part. This isn't just comfortable by Viking standards. This is luxury accommodation. The furs represent successful hunts, dangerous expeditions, and enough wealth to afford bedding that doesn't consist of straw and sadness. And then you try to sit up, which is when the real shock begins. Your body moves differently. Your shoulders are broader than you remember. Your arms are thick with muscle that definitely wasn't there yesterday. And when you flex your hands, they're scarred, calloused, and roughly the size of dinner plates. These aren't the soft, manicured hands of someone who types for a living. These are weapons. Hands that have gripped sword hilts, pulled bowstrings, and apparently strangled at least a few enemies based on the interesting scars across your knuckles. You're in the body of someone who has clearly seen combat, survived violence, and built a reputation significant enough to afford a fur collection that would make medieval royalty jealous. The problem is, your modern brain has no idea how this person earned these impressive physical credentials. Looking around for something reflective to assess your new situation, you spot a polished metal disc hanging from a wooden post. It's not exactly a modern mirror, more like a medieval funhouse reflection that makes everything look slightly warped and ominous. What stares back at you is definitely not your original face. This is the face of someone who has spent years outdoors in harsh weather, whose diet consists mainly of protein and determination, and whose idea of skincare involves occasionally splashing seawater on their face and calling it good. Your hair is long, braided in places, and apparently hasn't been cut by anyone who understands the concept of even lengths. Your beard, and yes, you definitely have an impressive beard now, is thick, slightly unruly, and contains what you hope are just food remnants from recent meal. But the most unsettling part of your reflection is your eyes. They're harder than your original eyes ever were. These are the eyes of someone who has seen violence, participated in violence, and made peace with the fact that violence is a regular part of daily life. There's a confidence there that your modern self never possessed. the assurance of someone who knows they can handle physical threats. Scars decorate your visible skin like a roadmap of past conflicts. A thin line across your forehead suggests a close call with a blade. Your hands show burns that probably came from handling hot metal. Your forearms have the kind of development that comes from years of swordplay and axe work. You're looking at a professional warrior, someone whose job description includes killing enemies and surviving attempts at being killed. The body you're inhabiting has clearly been successful at both requirements. The reflection also reveals that you're wearing a simple linen tunic that's seen better decades, leather pants that are more patched than original material, and enough metal jewelry to set off every airport security system ever invented. As you emerge from your fur cocoon, you realize you're not in a private bedroom. You're in what appears to be an enormous communal hall filled with other sleeping Vikings, all of whom look like they could bench press small trees for entertainment. The longhouse is exactly what it sounds like, a very long wooden structure with a central fire pit running down the middle, sleeping areas arranged along the walls, and architecture that prioritizes function over privacy. Everyone sleeps, eats and lives together in one massive room that smells like smoke, leather and the collective body odor of people who consider weekly bathing a luxury. The ceiling is high and peaked, supported by massive wooden beams that are carved with intricate designs depicting various scenes of warfare, mythology, and what appears to be recreational violence. This isn't just a building, it's a monument to Viking culture carved in wood and decorated with the artistic sensibilities of people who find beauty in battle axes. But the most intimidating part of your morning wake-up call is the other Viking. As people begin stirring and starting their day, you realize that you're surrounded by what can only be described as a medieval special forces unit. Everyone around you is built like a professional athlete, covered in scars that tell stories you probably don't want to hear, and wearing enough weapons to supply a small army. Women and men alike move with the confident grace of people who have never questioned their ability to handle physical threats. The women, shield maidens, your Viking knowledge somehow supplies, look like they could arm wrestle bears for sport and probably win. Children, even the young ones, are playing with toy weapons and practicing combat moves that would be considered assault in your modern world. Viking parenting apparently involves training your offspring for warfare from the moment they can hold a stick. The conversation around you, conducted in Old Norse that you somehow understand despite never learning it, revolves around topics like which monastery should we raid next, how sharp should we keep our battle axes, and what's the most glorious way to die in combat. You're not just in a different time period, you're in a warrior culture where violence isn't just accepted, it's celebrated, perfected and considered the primary measure of personal worth. And somehow, your Viking body is expected to participate in this culture with enthusiasm and competence. Your modern sensibilities immediately demand a shower, but as you look around the longhouse for bathroom facilities, you quickly realize that Viking personal hygiene operates on completely different principles than your modern standards. The closest thing to bathing facilities is a wooden bucket filled with what appears to be ice water, positioned near the door for reasons that become clear when you see other Vikings using it. This isn't a relaxing soak. This is shock therapy disguised as cleaning. One particularly massive Viking demonstrates the proper technique. Strip down to basically nothing, pour the ice water over yourself, using a smaller wooden ladle, scrub vigorously with what looks like a piece of rough cloth, then quickly dry off and get dressed before hypothermia sets in. Here's where you discover that Viking bathing is less about cleanliness and more about survival training. The water is so cold it makes your teeth hurt just looking at it. This isn't refreshing mountain stream water. This is liquid that's approximately 2 degrees away from being ice, and it's apparently considered perfectly normal to dump it all over your naked body as a daily routine. But Viking peer pressure is apparently a real thing, because several of your longhouse companions are watching to see if you're going to participate in the morning bathing ritual. Declining would clearly mark you as either sick, weak, or foreign, none of which seem like good options in a culture that values physical toughness above comfort. You strip down, grab the ladle, and pour the first bit of ice water over your shoulder. The shock is immediate and comprehensive. Every nerve in your body simultaneously reports that you've made a terrible decision and should stop immediately. But your Viking body, apparently accustomed to this torture, handles the cold water better than your modern brain expected. Your muscles tense, your breathing becomes sharp and controlled, but you don't die or lose consciousness, which seems like a victory. The scrubbing process involves using a rough cloth that feels like it was woven from tree bark and sadness. It removes dirt, dead skin and probably several layers of flesh that you were still using. Your reflection revealed long hair and an impressive beard, but maintaining them requires tools and techniques that don't exist in your modern experience. Viking hair care apparently involves braiding, which sounds simple until you realize that your thick, somewhat unruly hair needs to be arranged in specific patterns that communicate social status, personal achievements, and probably your availability for combat missions. The other Vikings around you sport elaborate hairstyles that look like they require engineering degrees to achieve. Braids woven with metal rings, sections twisted and tied with leather strips, and overall arrangements that are both practical for combat and somehow aesthetically pleasing. Your attempts at Viking hairstyling immediately reveal your amateur status. Braiding your own hair turns out to be significantly more difficult than braiding someone else's hair, which was already beyond your skill set. Your fingers, despite being larger and more powerful than your original hands, can't seem to manage the coordination required for complex braiding patterns. Your first attempt produces something that looks less like a warrior's braid and more like you got into a fight with a rope and lock. The braid is uneven, loose in some places, too tight in others, and generally gives the impression that you have no idea what you're doing. Beard maintenance presents its own challenges. Viking beards aren't just allowed to grow wild. They're styled, braided, and sometimes decorated with beads, rings, and other metalwork that serves both aesthetic and practical purposes. Your beard, impressive as it is, currently looks like it belongs to someone who has been living alone in the wilderness for several months without access to grooming tools or mirrors. It needs trimming, shaping, and probably some kind of intervention that goes beyond your current skill set. One of the older Vikings notices your grooming struggles and approaches with what appears to be a sharpened piece of metal that serves as both a blade and a mirror. He demonstrates proper beard trimming technique, which involves a level of precision and confidence with sharp objects that makes you nervous. The question of bathroom facilities in a Viking longhouse presents challenges that your modern brain wasn't prepared to contemplate. Looking around for anything resembling a toilet, bathroom, or even basic privacy for personal needs, you discover that Viking sanitation operates on principles that prioritize efficiency over comfort. The solution is elegantly simple and horrifyingly practical. You go outside, find an appropriate location away from the living area, and handle your business in whatever weather conditions happen to be occurring at the time. This morning, those weather conditions include snow, wind, and temperatures that make your breath visible in the air. The designated bathroom area appears to be simply anywhere that's not inside the longhouse, and not upwind from the water supply. But Viking toilet etiquette involves considerations that never occurred to your modern sensibilities. Privacy is a concept that doesn't really exist in Viking culture. People handle personal needs with the same practical approach they use for everything else, quickly, efficiently, and without unnecessary embarrassment about bodily functions. The biggest challenge isn't the lack of facilities, it's the weather. Conducting personal business while snow is falling, wind is blowing, and your exposed skin is rapidly approaching frostbite conditions requires a level of determination and speed that transforms a simple bodily function into a survival challenge. Toilet paper, of course, doesn't exist. Your options include snow, rough cloth, or simply embracing the fact that Viking hygiene standards are different from modern expectations. The return trip to the longhouse after outdoor bathroom duties involves a brief but intense sprint through cold weather, while trying to restore feeling to body parts that briefly went numb. It's like an extreme sports version of a normal human function. Other Vikings handle this routine with casual efficiency that suggests they've been doing it their entire lives, which they probably have. For them, outdoor bathroom facilities in sub-zero weather is just Tuesday morning, not an exercise in survival and willpower. Your stomach is demanding breakfast with the intensity of someone who apparently burned a lot of calories being a professional warrior. But Viking cuisine is about to challenge every food safety principle you've ever learned. The morning meal doesn't involve cereal, toast, or anything that resembles your familiar breakfast routine. Instead, you're presented with what appears to be recently caught fish. Emphasis on recently, as in still has scales and doesn't appear to have been introduced to the concept of cooking. The fish is accompanied by something that might generously be called fermented milk, though it looks more like cottage cheese that has been left to contemplate its life choices for several weeks. The smell is distinctive. It's sour, thick, and apparently considered a delicacy by people whose taste buds have been trained by years of eating whatever doesn't kill them. Here's where you discover that Viking food safety operates on different principles than modern standards. Raw fish isn't just acceptable breakfast food, it's preferred breakfast food. The Vikings around you are consuming it with obvious enjoyment, discussing the quality of the catch, the skill of the fisherman, and the proper way to fillet fish using knives that are also suitable for combat. Your modern brain is screaming about parasites, bacteria, and foodborne illnesses that could result from consuming uncooked seafood, but your Viking body seems perfectly comfortable with breakfast foods that would send modern health inspectors into cardiac arrest. The fermented milk product tastes exactly like you'd expect fermented milk to taste: sour, complex, and with a texture that suggests it has achieved some kind of semi-sentient status, but it's apparently packed with nutrients and probiotics that Viking digestive systems require for optimal performance. You attempt to eat the raw fish with the same casual confidence displayed by your companions, but your face apparently reveals your modern food safety concern. Several Vikings notice your hesitation and offer helpful commentary about the quality of the fish and the proper appreciation of fresh catches. Just as you're adjusting to breakfast food that doubles as a survival challenge, someone places a large wooden cup filled with golden liquid in front of you. This isn't juice or water. This is mead, honey wine that serves as both beverage and social lubricant for Viking morning activity. The cup is enormous, holds roughly a pint of alcoholic beverage, and is apparently expected to be consumed as part of your normal breakfast routine. It's 7 a.m. and you're being offered what is essentially wine made from fermented honey. The Vikings around you are treating morning mead consumption like a normal part of starting the day. They drink deeply, toast each other's health and success, and conduct important daily planning discussions while consuming enough alcohol to impair the average modern person's ability to operate machinery. But refusing the mead would apparently be a serious social error in Viking culture. Mead drinking isn't just about alcohol consumption, it's about community bonding, showing respect for your companions, and demonstrating your capacity to handle Viking-level beverages without embarrassing yourself. The mead tastes like liquid honey with a significant alcoholic kick that hits your bloodstream immediately. It's sweet, complex, and roughly twice as strong as most modern beer. One cup contains enough alcohol to affect your judgment, and everyone expects you to drink it like it's orange juice. Your Viking body handles the alcohol better than your modern constitution would, but you can still feel the immediate effects of consuming a significant amount of honey wine on an empty stomach first thing in the morning. The social aspects of mead drinking are complex. There are toasts to be made, proper drinking techniques to demonstrate, and conversations to participate in while maintaining your capacity for coherent speech despite increasing alcohol consumption. By the time you finish your morning mead, you realize that Vikings don't just start their day with breakfast, they start their day with a social ritual that involves community bonding, alcohol consumption, and preparation for whatever violence the day might require. As you look around for something resembling familiar breakfast food, bread, grain, anything that isn't raw fish or alcoholic beverages, you discover that Viking meals operate on a much simpler principle. If it's not meat, fish, or fermented dairy products, it's probably not worth eating. There's no bread because grain is expensive, difficult to preserve, and not readily available during Viking sea voyages or military campaigns. The Viking diet is heavily weighted toward protein sources that travel well and provide maximum energy for physically demanding lifestyle. Your breakfast plate, such as it is, consists entirely of animal products: fish, some kind of preserved meat that might be dried whale or seal, cheese that has achieved an impressively strong flavor through aging, and the fermented milk product that continues to challenge your taste expectation. This is where you realize that Viking nutrition follows completely different priorities than modern dietary recommendations. Carbohydrates are luxuries in Viking culture, vegetables are seasonal and often unavailable. The entire nutritional system is built around consuming whatever protein and fat sources are available, supplemented by fermented products that provide necessary vitamins and nutrients. The preserved meat is incredibly salty, chewy, and packed with enough sodium to preserve it for months without refrigeration. It tastes like someone took regular meat, soaked it in seawater for several weeks, then dried it until it achieved the texture of leather. But your Viking body craves this high-protein, high-fat breakfast. Your muscles demand the nutrients necessary to maintain the physical condition required for professional violence, and apparently that means consuming enough animal protein to satisfy a small predator. The absence of bread isn't just a dietary choice, it's a practical reality of Viking life. Grain doesn't grow well in Scandinavian climates, doesn't preserve well during sea voyages, and doesn't provide the immediate energy required for swinging battle axes and rowing longships. Your modern brain keeps expecting familiar breakfast foods, but your Viking stomach is perfectly satisfied with a meal that consists entirely of preserved animal products and fermented dairy beverages. It's a breakfast designed for people whose daily activities involve potentially mortal combat. After surviving breakfast, it becomes clear that getting dressed as a Viking involves significantly more complexity than throwing on modern clothes. Your wardrobe apparently includes actual armor, iron pieces designed to protect vital organs during combat, and wearing it properly requires knowledge and assistance that you don't currently possess. The armor consists of a mail shirt made from thousands of interlocked iron rings, metal plates for protecting shoulders and forearms, and a collection of leather straps and buckles that are supposed to hold everything together in a configuration that allows mobility while preventing death. One of your fellow Vikings notices your obvious confusion with the armor system and approaches to provide assistance. Apparently, properly equipping a warrior for combat is a community effort that requires multiple people and detailed knowledge of how medieval protective gear functions. Here's where you discover that wearing armor is like putting on a very heavy, very complicated puzzle that could save your life. The mail shirt alone weighs roughly 40 pounds and has to be put on over a padded undergarment that prevents the metal rings from cutting into your skin during movement. Getting it positioned correctly requires lifting your arms while someone else maneuvers 30 pounds of flexible metal over your torso. The weight distribution is unlike anything you've ever experienced. The armor doesn't just add pounds, it changes how you move, how you balance, and how much energy you expend during normal activities. Walking in full armor is like wearing a weighted vest designed by someone who prioritizes protection over comfort. Arm and shoulder protection involves additional metal pieces that have to be strapped and buckled into place with precise tension, tight enough to stay secure during combat, loose enough to allow the arm movement necessary for wielding weapons. Your helper explains the proper way to adjust armor fit through a combination of Old Norse and physical demonstration. Apparently, improperly fitted armor is worse than no armor because it restricts movement without providing adequate protection. By the time you're fully armored, you understand why Vikings were built like professional athletes. Wearing 40 pounds of metal while maintaining the mobility necessary for combat requires serious physical conditioning and stamina. Over the armor goes a massive fur cloak that serves multiple purposes: additional warmth, weather protection, and a clear visual statement about your hunting prowess and social status. The cloak is made from what appears to be wolf pelts sewn together with leather strips and decorated with metal clasps. The cloak is impressively large, reaching from your shoulders to your ankles, and wide enough to wrap around your entire armored body. It's also incredibly warm, almost too warm for indoor wear, but apparently essential for outdoor activities in Scandinavian weather conditions. But wearing the cloak properly requires understanding Viking fashion principles that prioritize function and intimidation over modern aesthetic concern. The way you arrange the cloak communicates information about your rank, your recent achievements, and your readiness for combat. Your attempts at cloak arrangement immediately reveal your inexperience with Viking fashion. There's apparently a proper way to drape the cloak that allows quick access to weapons while maintaining full weather protection. Your initial attempts result in either restricted arm movement or gaps that defeat the purpose of wearing protective outerwear. The metal clasps that hold the cloak in place are both functional and decorative, featuring intricate designs that probably tell stories about your combat achievements or family history. Operating them requires understanding their specific mechanisms and proper positioning. Other Vikings notice your cloak arrangement struggles with amusement. Apparently, how you wear your outerwear is immediately visible evidence of your experience level and cultural integration. The fur itself tells a story. These are clearly high-quality pelts from successful hunts, arranged and sewn by someone with serious leatherworking skill. Wearing someone else's hunting trophies feels like borrowed courage, especially when you have no memory of participating in the hunts that produce these impressive fur. The weight of the cloak adds to your overall encumbrance, but it also provides a sense of protection and authority that modern clothing never achieved. You're wearing the preserved remains of predators that someone killed with medieval weapons, sewn together to create functional armor. The final element of your Viking outfit is headgear, and this is where you discover that popular media has been lying about Viking fashion for decades. There are no horned helmets, none, zero. The helmet available to you is a practical iron cap designed to protect your skull from sword blows without adding unnecessary weight or creating handles for enemies to grab. The helmet is simple, functional, and designed by people who understood that combat headgear needs to deflect weapons rather than make fashion statements. It's a rounded iron cap with a nose guard and cheek pieces that can be tied in place for additional face protection. Putting on the helmet completes your transformation from modern person to medieval warrior, but it also makes you understand why Vikings were so serious about physical fitness. You're now wearing roughly 50 pounds of metal and fur, and you're expected to fight effectively while carrying this load. The absence of horned helmets is just the first historical reality check you're about to receive. Real Viking helmets prioritize protection and mobility over intimidating appearance. Horns would be tactical liabilities, extra weight that serves no protective function, and provides convenient handles for enemies to grab during combat. The helmet fit is crucial for both protection and visibility. Too loose and it shifts during movement, blocking your vision at critical moments. Too tight and it causes pressure points that become unbearable during extended wear. Looking around at your fellow Vikings, you notice that helmet styles vary based on wealth, personal preference, and probably combat specialization. Some wear simple caps, others have more elaborate protection, but none feature the decorative elements that movies suggest. The psychological effect of wearing a combat helmet is immediate and somewhat unsettling. You look like a professional killer, and the reflection you catch in polished metal surfaces shows someone who is prepared for violence in ways that your modern experience never contemplated. Your complete Viking outfit, armor, weapons, cloak and helmet, represents a significant investment in warfare equipment. This isn't costume clothing, it's professional gear designed for people whose job involves staying alive while making other people dead. Now that you're properly equipped like a Viking warrior, it's time to discover whether your new body comes with the combat skills necessary to use all this expensive equipment effectively. The answer, unfortunately, becomes clear the moment you try to draw your sword from its sheath with anything resembling competence. The sword is heavier than any weapon you've ever held, perfectly balanced in ways that modern replicas never achieve, and obviously crafted by someone who understood that this tool might be the difference between life and death in combat situations. Your fellow Vikings gather to observe your weapons handling skills, probably expecting to see the competence that earned you the right to own such impressive equipment. Instead, they witness what can only be described as a masterclass in how not to handle medieval weapons. Here's where your modern brain meets the reality of pre-gunpowder combat. Drawing the sword requires a specific technique that prevents you from cutting yourself while removing a 3-foot razor blade from a leather sheath positioned at your side. Your first attempt nearly results in self-inflicted wounds that would have been both embarrassing and potentially fatal. The weight and balance of a real combat sword is unlike anything in your modern experience. It's not the clumsy, heavy prop from movies, it's a precisely engineered tool that feels alive in your hands when handled correctly, but becomes unwieldy and dangerous when you don't understand proper technique. Basic sword movements, cuts, thrusts, parries and blocks require coordinated footwork, body positioning and timing that takes years to develop. Your attempts at simple sword exercises look like someone trying to conduct an orchestra while having a seizure. One of the experienced warriors takes pity on your obvious incompetence and begins demonstrating proper sword handling techniques. His movements are smooth, efficient, and completely integrated with his footwork and body mechanics. When he swings his sword, it whistles through the air with precision and power that make it clear this weapon could easily separate limbs from body. When you swing your sword, it feels like you're trying to control a heavy, sharp pendulum that wants to take you down with whatever you're attempting to hit. Swordwork is apparently just the beginning of Viking combat education. Your training moves on to shield wall formation, the coordinated group fighting technique that allowed Viking warriors to dominate medieval battlefields through disciplined teamwork and mutual protection. Shield wall fighting requires each warrior to protect not only himself but also the person next to him, creating an overlapping defense system that's stronger than individual combat skills. It's like medieval teamwork where failure to coordinate properly gets everyone killed. Your shield is large, heavy, and painted with symbols that probably indicate your family history or combat achievements. It's also your primary defensive tool, your backup weapon, and your contribution to the group's survival strategy. Learning shield wall techniques immediately reveals the complexity of Viking group combat. Maintaining proper shield overlap requires constant awareness of your neighbor's positions, stamina levels, and combat status. Too much gap and enemies can exploit the weakness. Too much overlap and you restrict each other's weapon usage. The coordination required for effective shield wall movement is like synchronized swimming, except with weapons and the constant possibility of death. Forward advances, backward retreats and lateral movements must be executed in perfect unison or the entire formation collapses. Your initial attempts at shield wall participation are disasters of coordination and timing. You're either too slow, too fast, or completely out of sync with the warriors around you, creating vulnerabilities that would be fatal in actual combat. The physical demands of shield wall fighting are exhausting. Holding a heavy shield in proper position while maintaining formation movement and staying ready for combat requires conditioning that takes months or years to develop. Spearwork within shield wall formation adds another layer of complexity. You must coordinate your spear thrusts with your shield position, your neighbor's movements, and the overall formation strategy, all while adrenaline is affecting your fine motor control. The final element of your combat training involves learning to use the weapon most associated with Viking warfare, the battle axe. Your axe is both a close combat weapon and a projectile, designed for versatility in situations where combat distances and tactics change rapidly. Axe throwing looks simple in movies and modern recreational settings, but using a battle axe as a projectile weapon in combat requires understanding of distance, timing, and the specific flight characteristics of a weapon designed to kill people efficiently. Your first attempts at axe throwing demonstrate that there's a significant difference between recreational axe throwing at wooden targets and combat axe throwing, designed to disable armored opponents at various ranges. The physics of combat axe throwing involves calculations that your modern brain understands theoretically, but can't execute practically. Distance affects rotation. Too close and the axe hasn't completed enough rotations to hit blade first, too far and it over-rotates and hits handle first. Combat situations don't provide time for careful distance measurement and trajectory calculation. The weight and balance of a combat axe are optimized for both throwing accuracy and close combat effectiveness, but mastering both applications requires extensive practice and muscle memory that you obviously don't possess. Your throws are inconsistent, inaccurate, and demonstrate a complete lack of understanding about how to compensate for target movement, wind conditions, and the adrenaline effects that occur during actual combat situations. When you do manage to hit the target, it's usually with the wrong part of the axe at the wrong angle, or with insufficient force to be effective against an armored opponent who is actively trying to kill you. The experienced Vikings watching your training attempts offer helpful commentary about technique, but their advice assumes a level of physical coordination and weapons familiarity that you simply don't have. By the end of your first combat training session, it's clear that your Viking body came equipped with impressive physical capabilities, but the skills necessary to use them effectively require training and experience that you're desperately lacking. Your combat training disasters are quickly forgotten when you discover that today's activities include an actual Viking sea voyage. The longship waiting at the shoreline is both beautiful and terrifying, a masterpiece of medieval naval engineering, designed for speed, shallow water navigation, and transporting armed warriors across hostile seas. The ship is roughly 60 feet long, equipped with both sails and oars, and built with the kind of craftsmanship that makes modern boat building look like amateur hour. Every plank, joint, and fitting represents skilled woodworking, designed to keep you alive in conditions that regularly kill people. But admiring the craftsmanship ends quickly when you realize that you're expected to help row this vessel across waters that are cold enough to kill you within minutes if you fall overboard, and rough enough to make the rowing experience a full-body workout that could last for hours. Here's where you discover that Viking seamanship is less romantic adventure and more controlled survival emergency. Each oar is roughly 12 feet long, designed for powerful strokes that propel a ship carrying 30-40 armed warriors plus supply. Operating it effectively requires coordination, timing, and upper body strength that most modern people don't possess. Your rowing position places you on a bench with another warrior, requiring you to coordinate your stroke timing with his rhythm, while maintaining the cadence set by the entire crew. Poor coordination doesn't just affect efficiency, it can tangle oars and disrupt the entire crew's performance. The rowing motion itself is a full-body exercise that engages your legs, back, shoulders and arms in a coordinated movement that must be repeated hundreds or thousands of times during a sea voyage. Your first attempts at coordinated rowing immediately reveal your inexperience. Your timing is off, your stroke technique is inefficient, and your endurance level is completely inadequate for the sustained effort required for long-distance sea travel. The other rowers notice your poor performance with a combination of amusement and concern. In Viking culture, everyone's safety depends on everyone else's competence, and your obvious rowing deficiencies represent a potential threat to the entire crew's survival. 20 minutes into the voyage, as the longship encounters its first serious waves, you discover that your Viking body is apparently not immune to motion sickness. This presents an immediate conflict between your stomach's rebellion and your need to maintain credibility as a Norse warrior. The North Sea in 793 AD doesn't provide gentle sailing conditions. The waves are substantial, the ship movement is aggressive, and every motion combines to create the perfect storm of nausea-inducing sensations that make your inner ear declare war on your digestive system. Your modern brain understands that seasickness is a normal physiological response to motion that affects many people, but your Viking companions seem to handle the rough seas with casual indifference that suggests they've been sailing these waters since childhood. This is where Viking cultural expectations collide with basic human physiology. Showing weakness of any kind, including susceptibility to seasickness, is clearly not acceptable in a culture that values stoic endurance and physical toughness above comfort. The other warriors are watching to see how you handle the challenging sea conditions. Your first wave of nausea hits just as you're supposed to be contributing to the rowing effort. Fighting seasickness while maintaining rowing rhythm becomes a complex exercise in willpower, physical coordination, and pride management. The Vikings around you notice your distress but respond with what can only be described as motivational mockery. They offer helpful suggestions about focusing on the horizon, maintaining proper breathing, and not embarrassing yourself by vomiting on fellow warriors. Attempting to continue rowing while fighting nausea turns the physical challenge into a mental endurance test. Every stroke of the oar requires concentrated effort to prevent your stomach from rebelling completely. The ship's motion becomes increasingly aggressive as you move into deeper waters, and your seasickness escalates accordingly. You're now faced with the choice between maintaining Viking dignity and acknowledging that your body is not cooperating with your cultural expectation. As the shoreline disappears behind you and the longship enters open water, you realize that Viking navigation operates on principles that would terrify any modern sailor, accustomed to GPS, radar, and electronic navigation. The ship's navigation system consists entirely of the captain's experience, observation of natural phenomena, and what appears to be educated guesswork based on wind patterns, wave behavior, and celestial observation. There are no maps in the modern sense, just mental knowledge passed down through generations of seafaring families who have memorized coastlines, current patterns, and seasonal weather variations that affect sea travel. Here's where you understand that Viking exploration required courage that bordered on insanity. The captain navigates by observing the color and behavior of waves, the flight patterns of seabirds, and the position of the sun and stars. These natural indicators provide information about distance from land, water depth, and direction, but they require interpretation skills that take decades to develop. Cloud formations reveal the presence of distant land masses through reflected light patterns that are invisible to untrained observers. Wave patterns change subtly when deep ocean swells encounter underwater topography near coastline. At night, navigation depends entirely on celestial observation and the captain's ability to identify specific stars, constellations, and their seasonal positions relative to geographic landmarks. The navigation techniques are sophisticated but completely dependent on clear weather, good visibility, and the navigator's accumulated experience. Fog, storms, or clouds can render the entire navigation system useless. Your modern brain keeps expecting backup systems, redundant navigation methods, or safety equipment that doesn't exist. If the captain makes a mistake, gets sick, or dies during the voyage, the entire crew could be lost at sea without any way to determine their location or find their way home. The psychological pressure of navigation responsibility is enormous. The captain's decisions affect the survival of everyone on board, and there's no margin for error when sailing across open ocean in a wooden ship powered by wind and human muscle. After surviving your first day of Viking seamanship, you discover that this sea voyage isn't just for transportation, it's the preliminary stage of an actual raid. Your crew is planning to attack and loot a Christian monastery, which means you're about to participate in the kind of historical event that gave Vikings their fearsome reputation. The target selection process involves detailed discussion about various monasteries along the coast, their defensive capabilities, wealth levels, and the likelihood of encountering organized resistance. This isn't random violence, it's strategic military planning designed to maximize profit while minimizing casualties. Monasteries are attractive targets because they typically contain valuable religious artifacts, accumulated wealth from donations, and limited defensive capabilities. Monks are generally non-combatants who rely on divine protection, rather than military force to safeguard their communities. But choosing the right target requires intelligence gathering and tactical planning that reveals the sophistication of Viking military organization. Your fellow raiders discuss recent information about monastery schedules, seasonal variations in wealth accumulation, and the presence or absence of local military forces that might respond to an attack. Some monasteries have developed defensive preparations specifically designed to counter Viking raids, hidden valuables, escape routes, and agreements with local lords for military protection. Others remain vulnerable due to their isolated locations and peaceful mission. The conversation reveals that successful raiding requires understanding of Christian religious calendar, monastery daily routines, and the political relationships between religious communities and secular authorities. Weather conditions, tide schedules, and seasonal daylight variations all factor into raid timing. The attack must be coordinated with natural conditions that favor rapid approach, successful landing, and quick escape if necessary. Your modern ethical framework is struggling with the casual planning of violence against peaceful religious communities, but your Viking companions discuss raid logistics with the professional detachment of people planning any other business venture. Once the target is selected, the actual battle planning reveals the complexity of coordinating a military assault using medieval weapons and tactics. Every aspect of the raid must be choreographed to ensure maximum effectiveness and minimum risk to the raiding party. The plan involves synchronized approach, rapid deployment from the longship, coordinated assault on multiple monastery entrances, and efficient collection of valuable items before local authorities can respond with military force. Each warrior has specific responsibilities during the raid. Some focus on securing entrances and preventing escape, others search for hidden valuables, and designated individuals handle the collection and transportation of loot back to the ship. Here's where you realize that Viking raids were military operations requiring discipline and coordination that rivaled professional armies. The timing must be precise. Too early and the monastery might be prepared for defense, too late and local military forces might have time to organize a response. The attack window is narrow and requires split-second execution. Communication during the raid relies on pre-arranged signals and hand gestures that allow coordination without alerting defenders to specific tactical movements. Everyone must understand their role without requiring detailed verbal instructions during combat. Contingency planning addresses various scenarios. What happens if the monastery is better defended than expected? How to handle unexpected military resistance, and evacuation procedures if the raid encounters organized opposition. Your role in the battle plan is somewhat unclear, given your obvious inexperience with Viking combat tactics, but you're apparently expected to contribute meaningfully to the raid's success. The discussion of acceptable casualties reveals the serious nature of the undertaking. These aren't movie adventures, they're real military operations where people die, and everyone understands that they might not survive the encounter. The final preparation for the raid involves learning the psychological warfare techniques that Vikings use to intimidate opponents and coordinate group attacks. War cries aren't just noise, they're tactical tools designed to communicate information while terrorizing enemy. Different war cries convey specific tactical information to fellow raiders while creating maximum psychological impact on defenders. A properly executed war cry can cause panic among untrained opponents and coordinate attack timing among dispersed forces. Your fellow Vikings demonstrate various war cries, each designed for specific tactical situations. Some are used to signal attack initiation, others coordinate group movements, and some are purely designed to create terror among enemies who aren't expecting organized military assault. But learning to produce effective war cries requires understanding both the tactical purpose and the psychological impact. The volume and intensity of proper war cries must carry over battlefield noise while projecting confidence and aggression that demoralizes opponents. It's not just shouting, it's controlled vocal projection designed for maximum tactical and psychological effect. Your modern voice and vocal training are completely inadequate for producing the kind of terrifying sounds that experienced Vikings generate. Your attempts sound more like someone having a medical emergency than a warrior preparing for combat. The physical technique for effective war cries involves breath control, posture and vocal cord usage that takes practice to develop. Vikings learn these techniques through years of training and actual combat experience. Different types of enemies require different psychological approaches. Monks might be terrorized by sounds that wouldn't affect experienced soldiers, while Viking opponents might respond only to war cries that demonstrate superior aggression and fighting spirit. The timing of war cries during combat is crucial. Too early and you alert enemies to your approach. Too late and you miss the opportunity to create maximum psychological impact during the initial assault phase. Your practice sessions with war cry techniques reveal another area where your Viking body comes equipped with the physical capabilities but lacks the training and experience necessary to use them effectively in actual combat situations. Dawn breaks grey and cold as your longship approaches the target monastery's coastline, and you're about to experience your first Viking raid from the inside. The beach landing operation reveals the precision and coordination that made Norse raiders so effective at surprise attacks on unprepared coastal targets. The monastery sits on a rocky promontory overlooking a small bay, its stone walls and wooden buildings clearly visible in the morning light. Smoke rises from cooking fires, suggesting normal daily routine that's about to be violently interrupted by your arrival. Your longship captain coordinates the approach with practiced efficiency, using wind and current to bring the vessel close to shore while maintaining the element of surprise. The ship's shallow draft allows landing directly on the beach, eliminating the need for smaller boats or swimming. This is where you realize that Viking raid tactics were perfected through years of practice and brutal efficiency. The beach landing must be executed rapidly to prevent defenders from organizing resistance or escaping to alert local authorities. Every second of delay increases the risk of organized opposition or the loss of valuable loot. Your fellow raiders move with coordinated precision that reveals extensive training and experience. Weapons are secured for rapid deployment, valuable equipment is protected from water damage, and everyone understands their specific role in the assault. The moment the ship's bow touches the beach, warriors leap into the surf and begin hauling the vessel onto dry land. The longship must be secured quickly to ensure rapid escape if the raid encounters unexpected resistance. Your contribution to the beach landing operation is enthusiastic but ineffective, highlighting your lack of experience with amphibious assault techniques. The other raiders work around your obvious inexperience while maintaining operational efficiency. The monastery's bells begin ringing as lookouts spot the Viking ship, but the alarm comes too late to organize meaningful resistance. The element of surprise is achieved, and the raid transitions from approach phase to active assault. As your raiding party storms through the monastery gates, you come face to face with the human reality of Viking raids. The monks aren't abstract historical figures, they're terrified people whose peaceful routine has been shattered by the arrival of armed warriors seeking wealth and glory. Most of the monks are elderly men who have dedicated their lives to religious study, manuscript copying, and peaceful contemplation. They're completely unprepared for violence, and have no training or equipment for military resistance. Their response to the raid varies from panic-stricken flight to resigned acceptance of their fate. Some attempt to hide valuable items or protect religious artifacts. Others simply pray and hope for divine intervention to save their community. Here's where the historical romance of Viking raids meets the brutal reality of medieval violence. These aren't evil people deserving of attack, they're scholars, teachers, and religious devotees, whose only crime is possessing wealth that Vikings want to steal. Your modern moral framework struggles with participating in violence against innocent people, but your Viking companions show no hesitation or moral conflict about terrorizing peaceful monks. This is their profession, their culture, and their path to wealth and social status. Successful raids bring prosperity to Viking communities and families. The monastery contains impressive wealth, gold religious artifacts, illuminated manuscripts worth fortunes, and accumulated donations from faithful Christians. The monks' lifestyle may be simple, but their institution has significant material assets. Some monks speak Norse, revealing the complex cultural relationships between Christian communities and Viking territory. These aren't completely foreign peoples, there's ongoing trade, diplomatic contact, and cultural exchange even amid military conflict. Your role in the monastery assault is complicated by your reluctance to participate in violence against non-combatants, but your fellow raiders expect you to contribute meaningfully to the operation's success. The systematic looting of the monastery reveals both the thoroughness of Viking raid techniques and the moral complexity of participating in organized theft from religious community. Every valuable item must be identified, collected, and transported to the ship before local military forces can respond. Religious artifacts made from precious metals are obvious targets: crosses, chalices, religious decorations, and liturgical items that represent significant wealth in portable form. These items are both valuable and relatively easy to transport during rapid evacuation. Illuminated manuscripts represent enormous value, but are difficult to preserve during sea travel. Some books are worth more than small farms, but transporting them safely requires care that might not be practical during military operation. This is where you discover that Viking raids involved complex decisions about value, portability, and risk management. Not everything valuable can be taken. Size, weight, and fragility limit what can be successfully transported during rapid evacuation. Raiders must make quick decisions about which items justify the effort required for removal. Some wealth is hidden by monks who anticipated the possibility of raids. Finding concealed valuables requires systematic searching and sometimes interrogation of captured monastery residents. The time pressure of looting operations creates difficult choices. Thorough searching maximizes profits, but increases the risk of encountering organized military resistance before the raiders can escape. Your modern conscience struggles with participating in theft from people who have done nothing to deserve attack, but refusing to participate would mark you as either cowardly or disloyal to your Viking companion. The monastery's wealth is impressive: accumulated donations, religious artifacts, and precious items that represent the prosperity of Christian communities. The successful raid will provide resources for entire Viking families and communities. The monks watch helplessly as their life's work and community's treasures are systematically removed by armed raiders who show no remorse about destroying peaceful religious life for material gain. Your participation in the loot collection is half-hearted and conflicted, but you realize that refusing to participate would create serious problems with your fellow Vikings, whose survival and prosperity depend on successful raiding operations. After surviving your first raid, you discover that your mysterious ability to understand Old Norse doesn't extend to speaking it fluently or understanding the complex cultural nuances embedded in Viking communication. Your comprehension is functional, but your speech patterns immediately mark you as someone who doesn't quite belong. Old Norse isn't just a different language, it's a completely different way of conceptualizing and expressing ideas. The grammar, vocabulary, and cultural assumptions built into the language reflect worldviews that don't translate directly to modern thinking patterns. Your attempts at normal conversation reveal gaps in your linguistic knowledge that go beyond simple vocabulary deficits. You're missing cultural context, historical references, and social subtleties that native speakers take for granted. Here's where you realize that language is more than just words. It's a complete cultural operating system. Viking conversation includes complex systems of honor, obligation, and social relationships that are expressed through specific terminology and grammatical structures. Using the wrong words or phrases can accidentally insult someone or misrepresent your intentions. Poetic language is extremely important in Viking culture, and the ability to speak in complex metaphorical constructions is a mark of intelligence and social status. Your modern direct communication style sounds crude and unsophisticated to Norse ears. Skaldic poetry, the highly complex verse form used by Viking poets, requires understanding of intricate metaphorical systems, mythological references, and grammatical techniques that take years to master. Your attempts at poetic expression are embarrassingly primitive. Legal and formal language involves specific terminology and phrasing that carry precise meanings in Viking legal and social systems. Misusing legal language could have serious consequences for your social standing and legal rights. Religious and mythological vocabulary requires understanding of complex belief systems, ritual practices, and theological concepts that permeate Viking culture, but don't correspond to modern religious thinking. Viking literacy involves a completely different writing system, runes, that serves both practical and magical purposes in Norse culture. Learning to read and write runes is essential for full participation in Viking society, but the runic system operates on principles that challenge your modern literacy assumption. Runes aren't just letters, they're symbols that carry magical significance, historical meaning, and cultural power beyond their simple phonetic values. Each rune has a name, a meaning, and associations with mythological concepts that affect how they're used in writing. The runic alphabet contains fewer characters than modern alphabets, which means some sounds must be represented by combinations or context-dependent interpretations. This creates ambiguity that requires cultural knowledge to resolve correctly. But runic literacy is more than just learning a different alphabet, it's understanding an entirely different relationship between writing and meaning. Runic inscriptions often serve commemorative, magical, or legal purposes rather than simple communication. The choice of runes for specific texts carries meaning beyond the literal words being expressed. Carving runes requires understanding of the materials, tools, and techniques used for creating permanent inscriptions in stone, wood, or metal. The physical process of runic writing is completely different from modern writing methods. Some runes have multiple meanings or can be combined to create complex symbolic messages that operate on several interpretive levels simultaneously. Reading runic texts requires understanding these multiple meanings and their cultural contexts. Your attempts at runic writing produce texts that are technically correct but culturally inappropriate or accidentally meaningful in ways you don't understand. The gap between phonetic accuracy and cultural competence is enormous. Magic and divination uses of runes require understanding of their symbolic meanings, mythological associations, and ritual applications that go far beyond simple literacy skill. Viking culture places enormous value on skaldic poetry, complex verse forms that combine entertainment, historical record-keeping, and social commentary in highly sophisticated artistic expression. Skalds are respected figures whose poetic abilities earn them prestigious positions in Viking society. Skaldic poetry uses intricate metaphorical systems called kennings that replace simple nouns with complex poetic construction. A sword might be called wound snake or blood drinker, and understanding these metaphors requires extensive cultural knowledge. The grammatical structure of skaldic verse allows words to be arranged in patterns that create multiple meanings simultaneously. A single stanza might tell a story, reference mythology, and praise a patron all at the same time. Here's where you discover that Viking poetry was intellectual athletics that required years of training and cultural mastery. Creating proper skaldic verse requires understanding of mythology, history, legal concepts, and cultural values that inform the metaphorical systems used in complex poetry. Your modern cultural references don't translate to Viking poetic construction. The social function of skalds involves more than entertainment. They serve as historians, political commentators, and cultural authorities whose poetry shapes public opinion and preserves important information for future generations. Improvised verse composition is a highly valued skill that demonstrates quick wit, cultural knowledge, and poetic ability under pressure. Skalds are expected to create appropriate poetry spontaneously during social gatherings and formal occasions. Your attempts at skaldic composition reveal the enormous gap between understanding poetry intellectually and being able to create it within cultural expectations and artistic standards. The competitive aspects of skaldic poetry involve verbal dueling, complex riddles, and demonstrations of superior cultural knowledge through poetic virtuosity. These competitions establish social hierarchy and intellectual reputation within Viking community. Professional skalds travel between courts, preserving and transmitting cultural information while earning their living through poetic performance. It's a career path that requires extensive training, cultural knowledge, and artistic ability that you clearly don't possess. In a world without television, internet, or written books for general consumption, Vikings have developed sophisticated systems for creating, preserving, and sharing information through oral storytelling traditions that function as their primary entertainment and historical record-keeping medium. Saga creation involves transforming recent events, historical occurrences, and mythological concepts into narrative forms that are both entertaining and educational. Every raid, family dispute, legal case, heroic achievement becomes potential material for saga development. The storytelling process requires not just memory skills, but dramatic ability, cultural knowledge, and understanding of audience expectations. A good saga teller must be part historian, part entertainer, and part cultural interpreter. Here's where you discover that Viking information systems were sophisticated social technologies that required specialized skills. Saga accuracy involves balancing historical thirth with entertaining narrative construction. Events must be presented in ways that honor the participants, while creating stories that audiences want to hear repeatedly. The social function of sagas extends beyond entertainment. They preserve legal precedents, family histories, cultural values, and practical information that Viking communities need for decision-making and cultural continuity. Interactive storytelling allows audience members to request specific stories, ask questions about details, and contribute information that enhances the narrative accuracy and entertainment value. Your attempts at saga creation reveal significant gaps in your cultural knowledge, historical understanding, and performance skills. Creating compelling sagas requires mastery of Viking culture that you simply don't possess. The competitive aspects of storytelling involve demonstrations of superior knowledge, memory ability, and dramatic skills that establish social hierarchy within Viking communities. Viking social media includes the practice of carving runic inscriptions on stones, buildings, and other permanent surfaces to communicate information, commemorate events, and establish personal or family reputation within the community. These runic inscriptions serve multiple purposes. Some are commemorative monuments, others are legal notices, and many are simply the Viking equivalent of "I was here" messages that establish presence and cultural participation. The choice of location for runic inscriptions affects their social impact and longevity. Stones placed in high-traffic areas reach larger audiences, while inscriptions in sacred or important locations carry additional cultural weight. But creating effective runic inscriptions requires understanding of both writing techniques and social messaging strategy. Stone carving techniques involve selecting appropriate stones, using proper tools, and understanding how to create inscriptions that will remain legible for extended periods despite weather and wear. The content of runic inscriptions must balance personal expression with cultural appropriateness, legal considerations, and social expectations about what kinds of messages belong in public space. Some runic inscriptions are collaborative projects that involve multiple community members contributing to commemorative monuments or important legal notice. Your attempts Attempts at runic stone carving produce inscriptions that are technically adequate but culturally inappropriate or socially awkward in ways that mark you as someone who doesn't fully understand Viking social expectations. The competitive aspects of runic inscription involve demonstrations of literacy, cultural knowledge, and artistic ability that contribute to personal reputation and social standing within Viking community. Viking social status operates on a complex system of reputation, achievement, and community recognition that functions as their equivalent of modern social media metrics, except the stakes are much higher and the consequences more permanent. Honor and reputation are tangible assets that affect your ability to participate in raids, arrange marriages, conduct business, and receive community support during difficult times. Poor reputation can effectively exclude you from Viking society. The Skål drinking culture serves as both social bonding activity and reputation assessment system. How you handle alcohol, what stories you can tell, and how others respond to your presence during drinking sessions all contribute to your social standing. Here's where you realize that Viking social dynamics were reputation economies where status affected survival. Battlefield achievements provide the highest status reputation enhancements, but they require surviving actual combat against opponents who are actively trying to kill you. Glory comes with significant mortality risk. Successful raid leadership, wealth accumulation, and skilled craftsmanship also contribute to reputation, but martial prowess remains the primary measure of male social value in Viking culture. Marriage alliances, family connections, and clan relationships affect your social position, but personal achievements remain necessary for maintaining status within these inherited social networks. Your current reputation is apparently based on achievements that you don't remember earning, which creates ongoing pressure to live up to expectations that you might not be able to meet. The social consequences of reputation loss include exclusion from profitable raids, difficulty finding marriage partners, and reduced access to community resources and support during emergency. Reputation management requires constant attention to public behavior, successful participation in community activities, and demonstration of the values that Viking society considers important. Your performance during recent activities has apparently maintained your social standing, but continued failures to demonstrate appropriate Viking competence could result in serious reputation damage with long-term consequences for your survival and social integration. Your growing reputation as someone with unusual characteristics, foreign speech patterns, strange reactions to normal Viking activities, and inexplicable gaps in basic cultural knowledge has apparently attracted attention from sources beyond your immediate human community. Two enormous ravens land near your position as you're practicing runic carving outside the longhouse. These aren't ordinary birds, they're larger, more intelligent looking, and they seem to be observing you with the kind of focused attention that suggests deliberate interest rather than casual curiosity. One of your Viking companions notices the ravens and immediately becomes serious, explaining in hushed tones that ravens of this size and behavior might be Hugin and Munin, Odin's supernatural messengers, who fly throughout the world gathering information for the All-Father. This is where you discover that Viking supernatural beliefs aren't just stories, they're active parts of daily life that affect real decisions. The raven's presence is interpreted as either divine attention to your unusual situation, or a test of your worthiness to remain in Viking society. Either way, their interest in you has significant implications for your social standing and future prospects. Your fellow Vikings are both impressed and concerned that you might have attracted Odin's notice. Divine attention can be positive or extremely dangerous, depending on whether you meet the god's expectations for proper Viking behavior. The ravens seem to understand human speech and respond to conversations with head movements, vocalizations, and behavioral changes that suggest supernatural intelligence beyond normal bird cognition. One raven approaches close enough to examine your runic carving attempts, apparently assessing your cultural integration and literacy development. Its evaluation seems less than impressed with your progress. The other raven fixates on your foreign mannerisms and speech patterns, possibly gathering information about your unusual characteristics to report back to Odin. The encounter lasts several minutes, during which you're expected to behave appropriately for someone receiving divine attention. Your performance will apparently be evaluated and reported to supernatural authorities. The divine attention you've apparently attracted leads to an encounter that tests your understanding of Viking mythology and your physical capability. During a community celebration, someone produces what they claim is Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, or at least a convincing replica that carries significant cultural and possibly supernatural significance. The hammer appears to be a massive warhammer, decorated with intricate metalwork and runic inscriptions that seem to shift and move when you're not looking directly at them. It's clearly a masterpiece of blacksmithing that represents enormous skill and cultural importance. The challenge of lifting Thor's hammer is both a test of physical strength and a demonstration of worthiness according to Viking mythology. Only those who meet Thor's standards for courage, honor and martial prowess are supposed to be able to lift the weapon. But attempting to lift a potentially supernatural weapon involves risks that go beyond simple physical challenge. Your fellow Vikings gather to watch your attempt, clearly expecting either impressive success or spectacular failure. The hammer test is apparently a significant cultural moment that will affect your reputation regardless of the outcome. The hammer's weight seems to vary depending on your approach and mental state. When you first grasp the handle, it feels impossibly heavy, far beyond normal physical limit. As you focus and commit to the effort, it becomes slightly more manageable, but still enormously challenging. Your modern skepticism about supernatural claims conflicts with the physical experience of handling a weapon that seems to respond to your intentions and worthiness, rather than just your muscle strength. The runic inscriptions on the hammer become more visible and active as you attempt to lift it, suggesting that the weapon is evaluating your character and finding you somewhat lacking in traditional Viking virtue. Your partial success, managing to lift the hammer slightly but not achieving the impressive overhead victory that would demonstrate complete worthiness, creates an ambiguous result that puzzles your audience. Your encounters with supernatural elements continue when a stranger appears at the community celebration, someone who claims to be a traveling merchant but displays knowledge, abilities and behavioral patterns that suggest a more complex identity. The stranger is charismatic, intelligent, and offers to help you with your cultural integration challenges in exchange for undefined future consideration. His proposals seem helpful but contain ambiguous language that makes you suspicious about the true terms of any agreement. Your modern experience with contracts and legal language makes you cautious about vague agreements, but Viking culture operates on honor systems and personal relationships that make detailed negotiations seem insulting and unnecessary. This is where your modern skepticism conflicts with Viking social expectations about trust and supernatural possibility. The stranger demonstrates knowledge about your unusual situation that he shouldn't possess unless he has supernatural information sources or abilities beyond normal human limitation. His offers to help with language learning, cultural integration and social advancement are appealing, but they come with hints about eventual reciprocal obligations that aren't clearly defined. Your fellow Vikings seem uncomfortable around the stranger but treat him with the kind of wary respect that suggests they suspect his true identity while hoping to avoid attracting negative attention. The negotiation process involves verbal agreements and symbolic gestures that carry more weight in Viking culture than you initially realize. What seems like casual conversation might actually be binding contract formation. Your attempts to get specific details about terms and conditions are met with amusement and assurances that everything will become clear in time. Responses that increase your suspicion while making refusal seem rude and culturally inappropriate. The stranger's departure involves theatrical elements, sudden fog, unusual animal behavior, and environmental changes that suggest supernatural abilities rather than normal human travel methods. Your fellow Vikings' reactions after his departure confirm that you've probably encountered Loki and possibly agreed to terms that you don't fully understand but can't easily escape from. The implications of supernatural bargains in Viking culture involve obligations and consequences that extend beyond normal human relationships and might affect your fate in ways that modern thinking doesn't adequately prepare you for. Your growing integration into Viking society includes navigating romantic relationships, which in Norse culture involve significantly different expectations, customs, and challenges than modern dating. Your attention is drawn to Astrid, a shield maiden whose combat skills, intelligence, and striking appearance make her one of the most respected and sought-after women in the community. Shield maidens aren't just female warriors, they're women who have chosen to pursue the same path of honor, combat, and adventure that defines male Viking identity. Astrid has proven herself in battle, earned her own wealth through raiding, and maintains complete independence within Viking social structures. Approaching a shield maiden romantically requires demonstrating worthiness through martial prowess, cultural competence, and personal achievements rather than simple charm or physical attractiveness. She's not impressed by modern courtship techniques or romantic gestures that don't translate to Viking cultural values. Here's where you discover that Viking romance involves challenges that could literally be life-threatening. Traditional Viking courtship includes physical challenges that test your combat skills, endurance and courage under pressure. Astrid suggests a friendly sparring session to evaluate your martial capabilities and personal character. The sparring match quickly reveals the enormous gap between your theoretical understanding of combat and your practical abilities when facing a genuinely skilled warrior who is testing your competence without actually trying to kill you. Astrid's fighting techniques are sophisticated, efficient, and demonstrate years of training and combat experience. She controls the sparring session completely while evaluating your potential as both a warrior and a romantic partner. Your performance is enthusiastic but clearly inadequate by Viking standards. You survive the encounter without serious injury, but you don't demonstrate the level of martial competence that would make you an attractive partner for a professional warrior. The social implications of failing a shield maiden's combat test affect not just your romantic prospects but your general reputation within the community. Other Vikings witness your sparring performance and adjust their assessment of your capabilities accordingly. Despite your mixed performance in combat testing, Astrid seems interested in pursuing a relationship, possibly because your unusual characteristics and mysterious background intrigue her more than your limited fighting skills concern her. This leads to discussions about Viking marriage customs and wedding traditions that reveal the complexity of Norse social contracts. Viking marriages aren't just romantic partnerships. They're legal, economic, and social alliances that affect entire families and communities. Wedding negotiations involve detailed discussions about property rights, inheritance laws, and mutual obligations that extend far beyond personal compatibility. The bride price system requires the groom to demonstrate his ability to provide for a family through payments to the bride's family, but the amount and type of payment reflect the social status and achievements of both partners. But Viking weddings also involve traditions that would be completely foreign to modern marriage custom. Wedding ceremonies include ritual elements that involve weapons, oaths sworn on sacred objects, and symbolic acts that bind the couple not just to each other but to their respective families and the broader community. The wedding feast requires contributions from both families and demonstrates the couple's social connections, economic resources, and community support through the quality and quantity of food, drink, and entertainment provided. Religious elements of Viking weddings invoke the blessing of various Norse deities and include ritual practices designed to ensure fertility, prosperity, and protection for the new family unit. Legal aspects of the marriage contract include detailed provisions for property division, inheritance rights, and procedures for divorce that are more complex and formalized than many modern marriage laws. The social expectations for married couples include specific responsibilities for defending each other's honor, supporting each other's family obligations, and maintaining the reputation and prosperity of their combined household. Marriage in Viking society immediately creates expectations for establishing a household, producing children, and contributing to the community's long-term survival and prosperity. These responsibilities involve challenges that your modern background hasn't prepared you for. Viking child rearing involves preparing children for a harsh world where survival depends on physical toughness, martial skills, and cultural competence that must be developed from early childhood. Economic responsibilities for Viking families include not just providing food and shelter but accumulating wealth through raiding, trading, or skilled craftsmanship that ensures family prosperity and social advancement. Here's where you realize that Viking family life involves constant preparation for violence and death. Every Viking father must be prepared to teach his children combat skills, survival techniques, and cultural values that will allow them to function effectively in a society where warfare is a regular part of life. The mortality rate for Viking children is significantly higher than modern standards due to harsh living conditions, limited medical care, and the dangerous environment that characterizes medieval life. Starting a family means accepting the possibility of losing children to disease, accident, or violence. Astrid's expectations for family life include raising children who can contribute meaningfully to Viking society through martial prowess, skilled craftsmanship, or other achievements that bring honor and prosperity to the family. The economic burden of supporting a family requires successful participation in raids, trading expeditions, or other wealth-generating activities that involve significant personal risk and potential death or injury. Property and inheritance laws create complicated family dynamics where children's futures depend on their parents' ability to accumulate and preserve wealth while navigating the complex social and legal obligations of Viking society. The responsibility for protecting your family from external threats includes not just physical defense, but maintaining social relationships and community standing that ensure support during emergencies and conflict. Your modern parenting concepts, child psychology, educational theory, and child safety practices don't translate to a culture where children must be prepared for adult responsibilities and dangers from early childhood. The pressure to produce male heirs creates additional family dynamics related to gender roles, inheritance expectations, and the continuation of family honor and reputation across generations. Your first Viking winter presents survival challenges that make your previous experiences seem like mild inconveniences. The polar night brings months of limited daylight, extreme cold, and life-threatening conditions that test every aspect of human endurance and survival skill. Temperatures drop well below freezing and stay there for months, creating conditions where exposed skin can freeze within minutes and improperly heated living spaces can become death traps for unprepared inhabitants. The longhouse heating system relies entirely on fire management skills that require constant attention, proper fuel conservation, and understanding of ventilation principles that prevent both freezing and carbon monoxide poisoning. This is where you discover that winter survival was the ultimate test of Viking competence and community cooperation. Fuel management becomes a critical survival skill that affects the entire community's ability to maintain life-sustaining temperatures throughout the long winter month. Every piece of firewood must be conserved and used efficiently. Clothing systems for extreme cold weather involve multiple layers of wool, fur, and leather that must be properly maintained, adjusted for activity levels, and kept dry to maintain insulating properties. Food preservation and rationing require careful calculation of caloric needs, storage capabilities, and consumption rates to ensure adequate nutrition throughout months when fresh food sources are unavailable. The psychological challenges of polar night include dealing with extended darkness, confined living conditions, and the constant awareness that survival depends on successfully managing limited resources for months. Community cooperation becomes essential for winter survival as individuals must share resources, coordinate heating schedules, and support community members who are struggling with the physical and mental challenges of extreme winter conditions. Your modern experience with central heating, grocery stores, and electric lighting has not prepared you for the reality of surviving months in sub-freezing conditions using only medieval technology and community resources. The Viking food storage system for winter survival requires preservation techniques and resource management skills that your modern background hasn't taught you. Every calorie consumed during winter must have been acquired and preserved during the warmer months when hunting, fishing, and gathering were possible. Meat preservation involves smoking, salting, and drying techniques that transform fresh protein into forms that remain edible for months without refrigeration. These processes require precise timing, proper technique, and understanding of food safety principles that prevent spoilage and poisoning. Fish preservation through smoking and salt curing creates protein sources that can sustain communities through months when fresh fishing becomes impossible due to ice coverage and dangerous weather conditions. But food storage failure during winter doesn't just mean inconvenience. It means death for entire communities. Dairy preservation involves creating cheese and fermented products that provide essential nutrients and calories while remaining stable without refrigeration throughout the winter storage period. Grain and vegetable preservation requires understanding of proper harvesting timing, storage conditions, and processing techniques that prevent spoilage while maintaining nutritional value. The rationing system for winter food supplies requires careful calculation of community needs, individual caloric requirements, and consumption schedules that ensure adequate nutrition without depleting stores before spring. Your modern eating habits, frequent meals, fresh produce, and unlimited food access must be abandoned in favor of rationed consumption patterns designed for survival rather than comfort or preference. Emergency food protocols include identifying alternative nutrition sources, recognizing early signs of malnutrition, and community decisions about resource allocation during critical shortage situations. The social dynamics of food sharing during winter scarcity create complex community relationships where individual survival depends on group cooperation and mutual support during the most challenging months. The psychological challenges of surviving months of darkness and confinement require entertainment and social activities that maintain community morale and mental health during the most difficult period of the Viking year. Storytelling becomes crucial for winter survival as sagas, myths, and historical tales provide entertainment while preserving cultural information and community identity during months of isolation from the outside world. Games and physical competitions help maintain fitness levels and social bonds while providing entertainment that breaks the monotony of winter confinement and resource conservation activity. Here's where you discover that Viking entertainment served essential survival functions beyond simple amusement. Musical activities include singing, drumming, and other performances that provide emotional outlets and community bonding during the psychological challenges of extended darkness and confinement. Craftsmanship projects allow individuals to maintain productive activities while creating useful items, weapons, tools, clothing and household goods that contribute to community resources and individual skill development. Intellectual competitions including riddle contests, poetry composition, and memory challenges provide mental stimulation while demonstrating cultural knowledge and maintaining cognitive abilities during physically inactive periods. Social drinking and feasting events, when resources permit, provide community celebrations that maintain morale and reinforce social bonds during the most challenging survival conditions. Religious and ritual activities offer spiritual comfort and community identity reinforcement through shared beliefs and cultural practices that provide meaning and purpose during survival challenges. Your modern entertainment expectations, television, internet, and unlimited recreational options must be replaced by activities that serve both entertainment and survival functions within limited resource constraints. The creative challenges of developing new entertainment activities using only available materials and community talents require innovation and cultural adaptation that builds both individual and community resilience. Your integration into Viking warrior culture eventually leads to exposure to berserker traditions, the legendary battle frenzy that allowed certain warriors to fight with supernatural intensity and apparent immunity to pain and fear. The other Vikings suggest that your unusual characteristics might make you a candidate for berserker training. Berserker transformation isn't just about getting angry. It's a complex psychological and physiological state that requires specific preparation, mental conditioning, and understanding of techniques that induce altered consciousness suitable for extreme combat situations. The preparation process involves ritual activities, specific dietary practices, and mental exercises designed to break down normal psychological barriers that prevent humans from accessing their full capacity for violence and aggression. But attempting to induce berserker frenzy involves risks that go far beyond normal combat dangers. The psychological techniques for entering berserker state require abandoning normal conscious control and allowing primitive survival instincts to dominate rational thought processes. This transformation can be difficult to reverse and control. Ritual preparation includes consuming certain substances, fermented beverages, mushroom preparations, and other materials that alter consciousness and reduce the psychological barriers that normally prevent extreme violence. The physical conditioning for berserker combat involves training exercises that build pain tolerance, aggression responses, and combat effectiveness while in altered mental states that prioritize attack over defense or self-preservation. Your first attempts at berserker induction produce mixed results, increased aggression and reduced pain sensitivity, but not the complete psychological transformation that characterizes experienced berserker warriors. The social aspects of berserker culture include specific bonds with other berserker warriors, and responsibilities for controlling and directing berserker fury during combat situations to prevent friendly fire casualties. The berserker tradition includes wearing bearskins during combat as both physical protection and symbolic connection to bear-like fighting qualities, strength, ferocity, and apparent invulnerability to normal human pain and fear responses. The bearskin isn't just costume, it's psychological conditioning equipment that helps induce the mental state necessary for berserker combat effectiveness. Wearing the skin of a powerful predator provides mental connection to animal fighting instinct. Combat techniques while wearing bearskin require adaptation to the additional weight, altered mobility, and sensory changes that come from fighting while wrapped in heavy animal hide that affects movement and visibility. Here's where you discover that berserker combat was both supernatural experience and practical military technique. The psychological effects of wearing bearskin include feeling connected to bear-like qualities, physical strength, aggression, and fighting capability that exceeds normal human limitations when properly channeled through training and ritual preparation. Combat effectiveness in bearskin requires learning to use the additional protection and intimidation value while compensating for the reduced mobility and sensory limitations that come with heavy animal hide covering. The intimidation factor of bearskin warriors on enemies is significant. Opponents facing berserkers in animal skins are confronting fighters who appear to be supernatural creatures rather than normal human warriors. Your attempts at bearskin combat reveal both the advantages and disadvantages of this fighting style. Improved protection and psychological effects balanced against reduced speed and tactical flexibility. The maintenance and preparation of bearskins for combat use requires understanding of preservation techniques, proper fitting and ritual practices that maintain the psychological and practical effectiveness of this specialized equipment. Your experimentation with berserker techniques produces an episode of uncontrolled aggression that demonstrates both the power and danger of altered consciousness combat states. The berserker frenzy, once triggered, proves difficult to control and direct appropriately. The loss of conscious control during berserker state results in actions that you don't remember clearly afterward, but which apparently involved significant violence that concerned your fellow Vikings about your ability to distinguish between enemies and allies. Recovery from berserker frenzy involves a period of confusion, physical exhaustion, and emotional instability that leaves you vulnerable and dependent on community support for protection and basic needs. This is where you learn that berserker power comes with serious personal and social costs. The physical aftermath of berserker episodes includes exhaustion, pain from injuries sustained during the frenzy, and potential damage from actions taken while in altered mental state. Memory gaps during berserker states mean that you must rely on others to inform you about what happened during the episode, creating anxiety about actions you might have taken without conscious awareness or control. The social consequences of uncontrolled berserker behavior include concern from community members about your reliability as an ally and your ability to function safely within the group during non-combat situations. Legal and cultural responsibilities for actions taken during berserker states create complex questions about accountability and compensation for damage caused while in altered consciousness state. The psychological impact of accessing extreme violence and aggression capabilities affects your normal mental state and creates ongoing concerns about the boundary between controlled warrior training and dangerous psychological instability. Recovery and integration after berserker experiences require community support, ritual practices, and ongoing training to develop better control over the altered states and their activation triggers. Your experience with berserker training reveals why this warrior path was restricted to individuals with specific psychological characteristics and extensive community support systems to manage the risks involved. Your experiences with berserker training and combat exposure lead to serious consideration of death, specifically the kind of honorable death in battle that Viking culture considers the ultimate achievement and gateway to Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain where the greatest warriors feast with the gods. Viking death philosophy differs fundamentally from modern attitudes toward mortality. Death in combat isn't tragic, it's the preferred conclusion to a warrior's life, assuming it occurs under conditions that demonstrate courage, skill, and devotion to Viking values. Preparation for glorious death involves ensuring that your life achievements, family responsibilities, and community obligations are arranged so that your death will enhance rather than diminish your legacy and your family's honor. But pursuing glorious death requires balancing honor-seeking with practical survival needs. The criteria for death that qualifies for Valhalla admission are specific. You must die while fighting courageously against worthy opponents, demonstrating the martial virtues that Odin values in his chosen warrior. Battlefield death preparation includes ensuring that your weapons and armor are in proper condition, your fighting skills are at their peak, and your mental state is prepared for combat that might result in death. The social aspects of preparing for glorious death involve discussions with family members, settlement of debts and obligations, and arrangement of affairs so that your death won't create unnecessary hardship for dependents. Legacy management includes ensuring that your achievements and reputation are properly recorded and remembered through saga traditions that preserve warrior accomplishments for future generations. The psychological preparation for accepting death in combat requires abandoning normal self-preservation instincts and embracing a worldview where honor and reputation matter more than personal survival. Your preparation for honorable death apparently attracts supernatural attention in the form of Valkyrie encounters, meetings with Odin's supernatural female warriors who select which fallen warriors are worthy of Valhalla admission. The Valkyries appear as warrior women of supernatural beauty and martial prowess who evaluate your combat performance, character, and worthiness for inclusion among Odin's chosen champion. These encounters aren't simple conversations, they're evaluations that assess your understanding of Viking values, your combat capabilities, and your commitment to the warrior path that leads to Valhalla. Here's where you discover that Valkyrie evaluation involves criteria that go beyond simple combat effectiveness. The Valkyries assess not just your fighting skills but your conduct during combat, your treatment of opponents, and your adherence to the honor codes that distinguish worthy warriors from mere killers. Character evaluation includes your loyalty to companions, your generosity to family and community, and your demonstration of the social virtues that complement martial prowess in Viking cultural ideal. The Valkyrie's judgment affects not just your potential Valhalla admission but your current reputation and standing within Viking society, as their approval or disapproval becomes known to other community members. Your interactions with Valkyries reveal areas where your modern moral framework conflicts with Viking warrior values, creating challenges for meeting their expectations for honorable conduct. The supernatural aspects of Valkyrie encounters suggest that Viking religious beliefs involve active divine participation in human affairs rather than distant theological concepts. Your Valkyrie encounters and growing understanding of Viking death culture lead to the opportunity to participate in what might be your final battle, a major raid that will either establish your reputation as a true Viking warrior or result in the glorious death that ensures Valhalla admission. The battle preparation involves understanding that this engagement is specifically designed to test warrior worthiness under conditions where survival is uncertain and honorable conduct is more important than personal safety. Your decision to participate represents acceptance of Viking cultural values and willingness to prioritize honor and reputation over modern concerns about personal safety and self-preservation. This is where your modern survival instincts conflict most directly with Viking warrior culture. The battle tactics for the final engagement prioritize aggressive assault and individual heroism over cautious strategy and survival-oriented decision-making that characterizes modern military thinking. Your role in the battle plan includes specific responsibilities for attacking fortified positions, engaging superior numbers of enemies, and demonstrating the kind of martial courage that creates saga-worthy stories regardless of survival outcome. The psychological preparation for potentially fatal combat requires abandoning modern anxiety about death and embracing Viking acceptance of mortality as a natural conclusion to warrior life when it occurs honorably. Equipment preparation includes ensuring that your weapons, armor, and personal effects are arranged so that your death, if it occurs, will be properly witnessed and remembered by survivors who can report your conduct to the broader Viking community. The social aspects of preparing for final battle include formal farewells to family members, settlement of personal obligations, and participation in ritual activities that prepare your spirit for potential transition to Valhalla. Your modern brain struggles with accepting the likelihood of death in combat, but your Viking cultural integration requires demonstrating the courage and commitment that characterizes authentic warrior identity. The final battle represents both the culmination of your Viking training and the ultimate test of your transformation from modern person to medieval Norse warrior. Your participation in Viking warrior culture eventually exposes you to their beliefs about Ragnarok, the prophesied end of the world that will involve the final battle between gods and giants, resulting in the destruction and renewal of the entire universe. Viking eschatology isn't just religious theory, it's practical information that affects decision-making, social priorities, and individual behavior based on beliefs about how the world will end and what happens afterward. The signs of approaching Ragnarok include specific social, environmental, and supernatural indicators that Vikings watch for as evidence that the final cosmic conflict is approaching. Here's where you discover that Viking religion includes detailed predictions about the end of everything. The Fimbul winter, 3 years of continuous winter without summer, represents the environmental catastrophe that precedes the final battle, creating conditions where normal human society breaks down and survival becomes increasingly difficult. Social collapse indicators include the breakdown of family relationships, the abandonment of honor codes, and the increase in violence and betrayal that characterizes the moral decay preceding cosmic destruction. Supernatural signs of Ragnarok include the release of bound monsters, the behavior of gods and giants, and cosmic events that indicate the approaching final conflict between order and chaos. Your modern understanding of environmental science and social dynamics provides different interpretations for phenomena that Vikings understand as religious prophecy, creating internal conflict about belief system. The psychological impact of living in a culture that expects apocalyptic destruction affects daily decision-making, long-term planning, and social relationships in ways that modern secular thinking doesn't anticipate. The approach of Ragnarok means that the gods themselves are preparing for final battle against the forces of chaos, and exceptional human warriors might be called to participate in cosmic conflict that determines the fate of the universe. Odin's preparation for the final battle involves gathering the greatest warriors from human history to serve as his army during Ragnarok, which explains the importance of dying gloriously in battle and gaining admission to Valhalla. The final conflict involves not just military strategy but cosmic forces, the fundamental struggle between order and chaos, creation and destruction, that determines whether the universe continues or ends in complete annihilation. This is where you realize that Viking warfare is connected to beliefs about cosmic significance and universal destiny. Your potential participation in the gods' final war represents the ultimate achievement for a Viking warrior, the opportunity to fight alongside divine forces, in battles that determine the fate of everything that exists. The cosmic scale of Ragnarok means that individual human concerns about survival, wealth, and social status become insignificant compared to the universal struggle between fundamental forces. The weapons and tactics for fighting alongside gods require capabilities beyond normal human limitations, suggesting that chosen warriors receive supernatural enhancement for participation in cosmic conflict. Your modern scientific worldview struggles with accepting beliefs about literal divine warfare, but your Viking cultural integration requires understanding these concepts as practical realities rather than symbolic metaphors. The outcome of Ragnarok includes both universal destruction and renewal, suggesting that participation in the final battle serves purposes beyond victory or defeat in any conventional military set. As your Viking experience approaches its climax with potential participation in cosmic warfare, you consider what legacy your unusual journey through Norse culture might leave for future generations. Your transformation from modern person to Viking warrior represents a unique perspective on cultural adaptation, survival skills, and the psychological changes required for functioning in radically different social environments. The skills and knowledge you've acquired during your Viking experience include practical capabilities, combat techniques, survival skills, and cultural competencies that have value beyond their historical context. But your most significant legacy might be the understanding that human adaptability extends far beyond modern assumptions about cultural flexibility. Your integration into Viking society demonstrates that modern people can develop the physical and psychological capabilities necessary for medieval survival, given proper training and cultural immersion. The documentation of your experiences through saga traditions ensures that future Vikings will have access to your unique perspective on cultural adaptation and the challenges of learning warrior skills as an adult. Your modern knowledge, filtered through Viking cultural frameworks, might contribute innovations or insights that benefit your adopted community while respecting their traditional values and practices. The relationships you've developed with Viking community members create ongoing connections that extend beyond your individual experience to include family and social networks that perpetuate your influence. Your participation in historical events, raids, battles, and cultural developments means that your presence affects the historical timeline in ways that might influence future generations of Vikings. The personal transformation you've undergone from modern individual to Viking warrior provides insights about human potential and cultural plasticity that challenge assumptions about fixed identity and cultural boundaries. Your legacy as someone who successfully bridged modern and medieval worlds might inspire future cultural exchange, adaptation projects, or historical understanding that benefits both communities. The ultimate measure of your Viking legacy will be whether your contribution to Norse culture enhances their survival, prosperity, and cultural continuity in ways that justify the risks and challenges you've encountered during your extraordinary journey. After experiencing the complete transformation from modern person to Viking warrior, it's time to evaluate your performance and assess how successfully you've adapted to one of history's most demanding warrior culture. Let's be honest about your achievements. You survived multiple life-threatening situations, learned basic Viking combat skills, integrated into a complex warrior society, and ultimately prepared to participate in cosmic warfare alongside Norse gods. That's significantly more impressive than most modern people could achieve. On the positive side, you successfully adapted to living conditions that would challenge the most experienced survival experts. You learned to navigate social hierarchies based on martial prowess and honor. You developed functional combat skills and cultural competencies that earned acceptance within Viking warrior communities. But your Viking report card also reveals areas where modern background created persistent challenges. Combat effectiveness, adequate with extensive training, but never reaching the natural proficiency that Vikings developed through lifelong immersion in warrior culture. Cultural integration, successful in most areas, though your speech patterns and occasionally foreign reactions continue to mark you as someone with unusual background. Survival skills dramatically improved from modern baseline, but still dependent on community support for many essential capabilities. Social adaptation, remarkably successful, considering the vast cultural differences between modern individualism and Viking communal warrior society. Spiritual integration, mixed results as your modern skepticism conflicted with Viking supernatural beliefs, though you eventually developed functional relationships with Norse religious concepts. Physical conditioning, substantially improved to meet Viking activity demands, though never achieving the natural athletic conditioning that characterized lifelong Viking. The comparison between modern capabilities and Viking requirements reveals both the limitations of contemporary life and the remarkable adaptability of human beings when circumstances demand cultural transformation. Modern humans excel at abstract thinking, technological problem solving, and complex social organization that Vikings couldn't imagine. But Viking culture developed human capabilities, physical conditioning, survival skills, social courage, and psychological resilience that modern life rarely requires or develops. Your success in Viking adaptation demonstrates that the basic human capacity for learning, cultural integration, and personal transformation hasn't diminished despite technological advancement and social specialization. The fundamental differences between modern and Viking life created specific adaptation challenges. Physical fitness requirements for Viking survival exceeded modern recreational exercise by orders of magnitude. Every daily activity required strength, endurance, and coordination that contemporary life doesn't develop. Psychological resilience for accepting violence, death, and constant physical danger required mental conditioning that peaceful modern societies don't provide or encourage. Social skills for functioning in honor-based cultures demanded understanding of reputation management, combat readiness, and community relationships that individualistic modern thinking doesn't prepare people for. However, your modern knowledge provided significant advantages in understanding strategic thinking, cultural analysis, and learning techniques that accelerated your Viking skill development beyond normal timeline. Your survival in Viking society depended primarily on community acceptance and protection rather than individual capabilities, demonstrating the importance of social integration for cultural adaptation success. Based on this comprehensive simulation, most modern humans could eventually adapt to Viking life, but the process would be challenging, dangerous, and require fundamental changes in thinking, behavior, and lifestyle expectation. Your survival would depend on several critical factors: physical adaptability to harsh conditions, psychological flexibility for accepting violence and honor-based social systems, learning capability for acquiring combat and survival skill, and social intelligence for integrating into warrior communities. Viking life wasn't just historically different, it was physically and psychologically more demanding than modern existence in ways that would challenge every aspect of contemporary lifestyle and thinking pattern. But this thought experiment reveals something profound about human adaptability and potential. The same cognitive and physical capabilities that allow modern humans to master complex technology and global communication also enable adaptation to medieval warrior culture when circumstances require it. Your Viking experience demonstrates that human beings are far more adaptable and capable than contemporary specialized societies typically require or reveal. The gap between modern comfort and historical survival demands is enormous, but it's bridgeable through determined learning, community support, and willingness to abandon contemporary assumptions about lifestyle requirements. Viking culture, despite its violence and harsh conditions, offers insights about honor, courage, community cooperation, and personal responsibility that remain relevant for modern life. Thanks for joining me on this epic Viking journey. If you enjoyed this historical survival simulation, please like the video and subscribe for more adventures that challenge your assumptions about human adaptability and cultural possibilities. And let me know in the comments, what aspect of Viking life would you find most difficult to adapt? Which Viking skills do you think would be most valuable in modern situations? Would you choose the warrior path if it meant potential glory but probable death? Until next time, appreciate your modern conveniences, but remember that the same human spirit that created smartphones and space travel also conquered oceans in wooden ships and built cultures based on honor, courage, and community loyalty. Sweet dreams, and remember, you're never more than 1200 years away from needing to know how to swing a battle axe and row a longship across hostile seas. Skål, and may you find your way to Valhalla when your time comes.